I'm Adrienne Irizarry, your resident reproductive rebel. And this week, I am joined by Dr. Stephanie Bathurst, clinical sexologist, family therapist, and intimacy guide to talk about sexuality and the second half of life. We've been told that desire fades as we age, but the truth is it transforms. Together, we dive into how sexuality evolves with age, what it means for long-term relationships, and how intimacy can actually become more sacred and powerful over time. If you are ready to reimagine aging as erotic, intimate, and liberating experience, this episode is for you. Tune into Reproductive Rebel because your sexuality doesn't have an expiration date. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm super excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be a good one.
I'm excited for it too. So before I get overzealous and jump into where we're going with this conversation, can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Of course. So I am a clinical sexologist and licensed relationship therapist. I own a private practice over in Oahu, Hawaii on the North Shore. My specialty is any and all things romantic relationships. I specialize in romantic energy theory, so focusing on energy theory, quantum physics as it applies to relationship dynamics and how we kind of use energy contribution to build and sustain healthy relationships. So anything from like resentment repair to libido compatibility to pelvic floor health and healing as we age, which I think we're going to dive into a little bit today.
Ooh, all kinds of good stuff. And now you guys can see why I had to have her on the show, because she offers a breadth of very unique and meaningful, deep ways of being able to work with relationship dynamics. I'm so excited for this conversation. We may have to do another one because I love what you do. So we were talking in our screening call about sexuality and the aging process. And I thought this would be such a great conversation to have because I have seen so much in my practice, things like, I love my husband, I want to be intimate, but it doesn't even cross my mind now that I'm going through perimenopause, or I hit 50 and I feel like my libido just got up and went. Sex feels different now that I am older and my body is changing. So I thought that you would be an excellent person to talk about sexuality and the aging process.
Yes, there's so much there. I feel like we could spend hours discussing all the different avenues. I'll try and truncate it as best as I can. When we're talking about perimenopause, there's so many experiences, and perimenopause, as we know, can last for like 10 years. It's not like a 3 months before menopause hits. It can be a substantial period of time in your life and relationships. What I tend to see is that it's a comorbid issue. There are many things that kind of coalesce at this life stage for so many women. And what that means is like, we're sleep deprived and we're chronically stressed because this is like, we have kids and really stressful jobs and a lot of responsibility. And so we're not sleeping well and our stress level's high, which naturally is going to deactivate libido, right? Because they operate on different nervous systems. We have that. We have some of the hormone dysregulation, which is very much real. depending on your stance on like aging as a disease versus really embracing the natural life cycle, there's a lot that we can do hormonally and with health supplements, even food as medicine, to kind of help your body balance and feel more like itself. And then we have a lot of like the relational barriers when you're with somebody for a long period of time. And in our society, we don't teach relational and emotional intelligence. So we don't often know how to heal wounds as they pop up. There tends to be, at this midlife mark, a lot of unsolved resentment. And so like the emotional barriers naturally impede our openness and receptivity to physical touch, sexual intimacy, really anything deeply vulnerable. So it's kind of many different things. And then, of course, childbearing is as magical and beautiful as it is a physical trauma. And for so many women, we don't get the education or the support for caring for our bodies after pregnancy. And so pelvic floor health, particularly weakened pelvic floors, can very much impact sensation, desire, confidence levels, openness of adventure or different types of play, because you're uncertain how your body is going to respond or react to it. So there's just so much there, and they all kind of interweave together at this period of time.
Yeah, it's such a dynamic part of a woman's life because you have the alchemical experience of brain chemistry that is changing as your estrogen and progesterone levels are changing. Estrogen softens your response to a lot of things. So things that you could sweep under the rug now, you can't. You just can't. And so we're dealing with and navigating, and I often liken this to teens. It's not the exact same, but there are similarities in the fact that we give a pass to teenagers around their hormone changes being the cause for snappy behavior and snappy attitudes and all that kind of stuff. And we often dismiss at some level that behavior as quote unquote just going through puberty. But then when women get to perimenopause on the other end, it's equally as long a process. Right. Because our body is starting the journey towards the end of our bleeding years, but we have similar kinds of emotional disruption and dysregulation, yet now we have the demands of a family, the demands of a job, sometimes the demands of aging parents. Yeah. And on top of all of that, women who've chosen to have babies later in life are now dealing with little people and little people's staminas. At the same time, they're dealing with aging parents and they're dealing with this big hormonal shift in their body. So there's a lot of pressure that affects the expression of the body during this phase of life. And with these kinds of changes, you know, one of the things we had talked about was the fact that this is an area that you specialize in, and then you work a lot with middle-aged women who have lost their libidos. You know, what do you see as some of the most common challenges, feedback, sentiments that you see in people coming into your practice?
Like the prominent reasons for libido loss? Yeah, so certainly pelvic floor dysfunction is a really prominent one. What I like to do when I have clients who come in is identify what their goals are and then help them sift through the secondary symptoms to get to the core ones, right? So for agitation, for low libido, people will come in, we'll figure out that they're exhausted. Maybe they're waking up 5 times in the middle of the night every single night because they have to go to the bathroom. So body's miscommunicating. There's like, you know, wires are getting crossed. And by resolving some of the pelvic floor dysfunction, we're allowing them to get deeper sleep. Sleep is where our body regenerates and rejuvenates hormones for the following day. And does cellular repair. Sleep is like super critical to all stability, emotional and physical. And so like really figuring out, because there are usually many different things wrong when people come to us, right? It's like, fix this. There's this myriad of issues and everything seems to be a problem and my life is imploding. And our job is kind of investigative. It's like, well, what's going on at the core? What do we feel like is triggering some of these other issues? And rather than focusing on these secondary symptoms, how can we get to the primary ones, right? So definitely pelvic floor dysfunction. Mind-body disconnect is super, super huge. If you have carryover of religious shame that we haven't managed from when we were younger, if there is relational resentment and we're feeling like our partnership is unfair or disrespectful, we have these self-protective mechanisms that activate that nervous system response of like, and once we tense up and we go into self-protective mode, our body naturally is going to prioritize safety and survival over sex. Mm-hmm. That's just like basic human biology. The more stressed you are, whether that's within a sense of relationship or just in life in general because of the situation, the higher your stress level, the less activating or like accessible your libido is. Mm-hmm. What I do like to do in the very beginning is to help women rule out if it actually is a libido issue, because oftentimes they will come in with that being the core catalyst for them contacting me. And when I ask, well, are you feeling desire or physiological arousal or interest or curiosity when you're watching this show, when you're reading this like spicy novel, when you're talking with your friends about their experiences? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is yes, it's not a libido issue. It's more environmentally specific, right? Like if your body is naturally and organically responding in some environments and situations, but not others, it's not biological, right? Your biology and anatomy seems to be intact. It's more emotional and psychological and what's going on in those other environments that make you feel unsafe.
Ooh, I think that's the best definition I have heard so far, to be able to clearly identify the root cause, essentially. Is this a physical thing or is this an emotional, psychological thing? I've never heard it explained that way. And that is a really clear, succinct way for people to understand it, because I do think that women think that, okay, my hormones are off, and they focus very much on their hormones changing like it's something that's quote unquote broken. Mm-hmm. And we have this very biomechanistic kind of approach to healthcare in general. Something isn't working right, we're going to quote unquote fix it. And that's not really how the body works. It's about being able to restore harmony, balance, groundedness, safety, and security that really helps the body to perform optimally. So being able to understand that this isn't being broken, because that's how I hear a lot of my clients talk about it. And to your point around pelvic floor dysfunction, the fact that pelvic floor PT, particularly after having babies, but really at any phase of a woman's life, ought to be a standard of care. And it just isn't here in the United States. And it's a shame, because even if you haven't had a baby, or if you've given birth via C-section rather than had a vaginal birth, you still can have pelvic floor dysfunction through the aging process. Your hormones are changing, your energy is changing. Chinese medicine understands that as a spleen Qi deficiency, and the energy is sagging so that all those hollow organs can't stay upright in the proper position. But we hold a lot of energy in our pelvis and in our hips. And when there's any sort of trauma, and by the time we get to perimenopause, we've had all kinds of stressors and challenges and things around our identity, things around how we feel about ourselves as sexual beings, things around financial safety and survival. All of us have hit one or all of those buttons at some point up until this point. So we're holding things in this part of our body, and add in the fact that you're going through a normal hormonal change on top of it. Yeah. You have the perfect environment, the perfect storm, if you will, for symptoms to show up. But it doesn't mean the body is broken.
Right.
And now we will take a short break from our episode to share an offering that will take your healing to a whole new level. How would it feel to stress less, feel more spaciousness in your body, all while reducing physical symptoms. I can tell you from personal experience, it's one of the most empowering and freeing experiences one can have. Rebel Remembered is a year-long journey using goddess archetypes, body wisdom, and ancient modalities to bring a level of health to your body unlike anything else. As a Chinese medicine practitioner, it has always been clear to me that the emotional body is at the root of physical symptoms in the body. This program is truly holistic, addressing physical symptoms by exploring spiritual and emotional themes, much like this episode. This opportunity only opens once a year, so be sure to get on the waiting list for when enrollment opens this fall. The link is in the show notes. And now, back to the show.
And this is why it's important to find a provider who thinks systemically, who is very knowledgeable, because this is a very unique specialty. But like the PC muscles, the entire pelvic floor is interconnected with the rest of the body, right? Like we have fascia lines directly going from the jaw and from the bottom of the feet to the pelvic floor. And so when we have chronic stress and we're grinding or clenching our jaw all the time, or when we have a lot of foot pain and we aren't taking care of the rest of our bodies, our sexual activation is going to be naturally impacted. And so it really is a systemic physical issue. We can't like isolate it from the rest of the body because it doesn't work that way. We don't work that way. We're one whole being, and trying to figure out what else are you going through and what else has been causing you pain or disruption, or do you feel disconnected from? You're not sure how you're feeling because you're so tuned out from that part of your body. Figuring out what those blockages are and then helping to unblock through EMDR, through acupuncture. There's so many means of support that we can build this system of scaffolding for each of our clients, and everybody deserves that.
Absolutely. Well, particularly when it comes to sexual performance, because we have all of these duality kinds of statements, like I keep using in different episodes that whole lady in the street and a freak in the bed idea, right? There's this duality that a lot of women walk so much of their life that by the time they get to this point, it's like, well, there's got to be something wrong with me. Why do I bother?
Yeah, it's really hard. Like we as a society put women in such rigid boxes that are just impossible to meet the standards of. Nor does it set them up for success and happiness or self-connection and self-love. And it's such a shame because it doesn't have to be that way. But yeah, I mean, for middle-aged women in particular, very commonly, loss of their sexual self or like disinterest in sexual intimacy is directly linked to them trying to embrace and like adapt to motherhood. What does it mean for me to embrace this new stage of life and expand my identity? And is there space or social allowance for me to both be a mother and a caregiver and this like strong maternal figure and also be a sexually explorative being? You know, they seem counterintuitive to one another, and they're not. We're divine, like beautiful, wonderful, feminine beings. And both of those things are naturally aligned with who we are meant to be. But society doesn't allow space for both of those to happen at the same time. And that's really hard for a lot of women to like contend with as they're going through identity development.
Oh, goodness. Absolutely. I see this a lot with my clients who are becoming mothers in their 40s. And they are starting to navigate the early stages of, I'm going to call it the hormonal murmur, that things are just on the brink of things starting to change, right? They might have noticed that they had a little bit of cycle weirdness before they got pregnant, or they got pregnant and then they had cycle weirdness afterwards. Like they're just on the early stages of this transition. And there's a social transition that happens too, where you're stepping into a new version or a new paradigm of who you are. So not only do you step across the threshold of matrescence, which you're becoming a mom, and that can totally throw your sense of center and self on its head, But then let's now throw the stage of life thing in on top of it, which totally throws off your center of self and what you want, your priorities, all of that. Chinese medicine understands it as instead of putting your energy into the giving of life, now you're putting your energy into your life. And it's aligning with what I want to do. Maybe it's a degree that I've always wanted to finish, but I had babies and I wasn't able to finish, or I hate my career and I want to do something completely different, or I want to go on more girls' trips. I want to travel more. So the energy starts becoming, this is a new chapter of my life where I get to explore a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then we come up against these social contexts of, well, you're not supposed to be hypersexual. If you're a mom, you're supposed to just be this like pious, demure mother, pure mother figure. And that being a sexual being or a sexual body is somehow dirty, unclean, unacceptable. I mean, there's a whole long list of words we can stick in there. And yes, a lot of this is speaking to this patriarchal narrative that we've all been living under. And a lot of this purity crap comes out of the Victorian era, but our bodies are designed to celebrate and give life at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love how you're talking about adapting to new life stages and what that means. And I've seen it in both kind of extremes of the spectrum. When middle-aged women come in and they're going through this identity, like expression redefinition, it can sometimes lead them toward exploring more advanced expressions of sexuality. And sometimes just from a neurological level, our nerves start to get a little quieter, as we get older. And so we tend to need a little bit more stimuli in order to feel similar sensation levels or meet that threshold. And so as we get older, I'll see women say, I want a little bit rougher of an experience in a good way, right? But I don't want this soft, loving touch anymore because it doesn't meet the same needs as it used to when I was 20. And that's fair and reasonable and wonderful. And we want to help shatter any of the shame that they may be holding on, wanting something a little more adventurous. And I also see it the other way, where it's in my 20s, maybe in my 30s, I explored and I had fun and sex was really transactional. Mm-hmm. And now I'm wanting it to serve a very different purpose in my life. I want to be selfish with experience and pleasure. And I know now that requires a lot more intentional and longer sensuous touch in order to activate those higher stages of orgasm, right? And so we see it both ways. Whatever works for you, whatever aligns for your happiness and satisfaction is what we support.
I love that. So for women who are in this stage of their life, I'm thinking that this is primarily your 40s to 60s, right? And obviously, these are topics beyond that as well, but I see a lot of the overt symptoms that, something is changing, being recognized by women right around 40. Chinese medicine believes that 35, you get extended this invitation to decide how you're going to spend your vital energy, according to Chinese medicine. And if you're still trying to work and live and play hard and work hard like you did in your 20s, when you're 35 and older, your stamina is different, you burn out a little faster and all of that. I noticed this transition for me was right around 38. I started seeing my body going, okay, that was a little intense this weekend. I think I need a little more recoup time than I used to. Not in a bad way. It was subtle, but it was more I need to be more intentional about how I'm managing my time and my output. By the time people hit 40, if they don't listen to that little invitation 5 years or so prior, by 40, they're starting to see it in their cycles. They're starting to see it in brain fog and fatigue and all of those kinds of things. And they start asking questions. Is this just cycle dysregulation or is this actually perimenopause? So that's why I use 40 as kind of my benchmark. But between 40 and 60, because the average age in the United States for menopause is 51. Where do you see people on that continuum coming in? Do you see them coming in more in that 40 range? And I'm saying this just because I know some people are like, so where does this all begin?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing people in the 40 to, I would say, 55-ish range coming in, wanting much more of a sensuous, emotional, intimate experience because sex is now serving a different function for them. And sex serves many, many wonderful functions. It's used as a bonding technique for relationships. It can help stave off andropause and menopause, right? I really hate this term, but like you use it or you lose it kind of thing. You want to keep activating those hormone releases in your body so that your body knows that you still need it. There's so many really wonderful pain relief. We know that orgasm is equally as effective as migraine medicine when migraine pain hits. So like there's many beautiful things, but for women in their 40s to like 50, 60, it's definitely like a redefinition of what they want out of the experience. And I think some of that comes from like a self-knowing and an empowerment, which is really beautiful to see. It's like, no, I made so many accommodations for other people and other people's needs my entire life. And I've done enough. And now it's my turn. And I'm going to assert these boundaries and be clear and help me to articulate what my needs are. And those are really beautiful moments where I'm like, yeah, take back that power. This is your time. And how do you want it to look?
I love that. So I can feel the next question people are thinking, which is, how do I start articulating that I'm essentially stepping into my sovereign queen era with my partner who has been with me since I was 20, mid-20s, early 30s. And we have this running expectation of who we are. And now this hormonal shift is inviting me into different places and spaces. And I want to maybe be more adventurous where I haven't before, or be less accommodating because I haven't orgasmed, because my partner is quicker than I am. How would you start working with people who are saying some of those things? I'm like regurgitating things that I've heard my clients say on a regular basis.
Those all sound familiar to me as well. I figured they might. I specialize in working with couples. So a lot of what I do is these exact conversations where partnership had like personal conversations where they're like, I'm just not happy and satisfied with this particular part of our relationship, and I need for that to change. And we've tried on our own and we're not figuring it out. And so my job is oftentimes to mediate those hard and difficult conversations, which is essentially a recontracting of the intimate relationship. You know what I mean? It's like, what is your ideal baseline? If I had a magic wand, what is it that you would want to have your needs be specifically met? And what is your partner's? And from that ideal marker, where's the non-negotiable? Like, I'm willing to be flexible up until this point. That's your spectrum, right? When we're talking about relational compatibility, our opportunities for negotiating a contract is matching up those spectrums and seeing where the overlap exists. To be like, here's what each of you are needing and how we can meet both of your needs simultaneously. It's a little more complex if we're talking about different relationship structures or relationship orientations, and somebody wants to be a bit more like open and the other person is still hard in monogamy, and those can be more difficult to navigate. But for general physical intimacy within a contracted monogamous structure, we just figure out like, what is the frequency? What type of sex? What is the reason for sex? How do you want to be touched? And what are the sensory experiences that enhance that for you? Talking about pressure and temperature and emotional foundation. Like, what are you needing to feel, see, hear, understand about your partner in order to have that kind of safety, security, stability? Because that, for so many women, is the foundation to good sex. It's having that first. I'm sorry, I think I went off on a tangent. What was your question?
No, That was excellent. It actually inspired another question. So while we're kind of focusing on the female experience here, you touched on a couple of things that I think are really important to mention. I've totally thought about doing a course about menopause and andropause because I do find that this is a phase where people have a lot of communication issues. And a big part of it has to do with both parties, both having hormonal changes at the same time. So Chinese medicine, going back to my background, understands that men's bodies shift in 8-year cycles, women's move in 7-year cycles. So for men, one of those big benchmarks is 40. This is where all of a sudden they start having changes in stamina. They have changes in erection quality. It might not be straight up ED yet, but they're noticing that maybe they aren't as hard as they were before when they're fully aroused, or it takes a lot less stimulation for ejaculation. Maybe not a true premature ejaculation, but it's different and it's headed in that direction. So having that information around 40 for men, women experiencing this shift, 35, then the next one is 42 for them. They're both kind of in that early stage hormonal alchemical soup at that point where both of their bodies are changing. So I think it's important to mention this because in our culture, we tend to think that we can be jackrabbits and it can be penis and vagina action right away. It's quick, it's hard, it's fast. This is what we're shown in the movies, all of this kind of stuff. And then when you start throwing like real life people stuff, like hormonal changes, and on top of all of that, all of a sudden we start having a very different conversation. He starts getting in his head because he can feel that something's different, but he's not quite sure what, because we haven't actually started throwing the A word around yet, right? Men start asking questions like, is this as good as it's going to get when they go into andropause? Women ask questions like, what's next for me? What can I do? I want to try this. It tends to be a little more like, I'm stepping into a new chapter of my life and I have a new zeal for all kinds of things. When they go into their perimenopausal journey and then step across the threshold into menopause. So how do you navigate these early stage changes in both partners while facilitating this conversation?
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to navigate is by helping them to externalize some of the issues, because the natural inclination is for your brain to say like, oh, this thing is hurt, I'm hurt, or I'm offended, or I'm upset, and to look around for concrete expressions for who or what is at fault for that upset. And naturally, because our partner is our constant variable in life, it's going to be our partner. With these experiences, with these hormone changes, we have like lack of clarity for decision making. We have forgetfulness in memory. We have agitation in mood, or like depression, anxiety worsens. We have anhedonia, which is just like a grayscale. Everything feels kind of blah, particularly for men, which can be personalized if we don't understand what's going on, right? And so normalizing all of that as being not the fault of either partner, and not necessarily the responsibility to fix for either partner, but allowing for there to be a conversation and an emotional container of like, I see that this is going on, but I know it feels kind of yucky for you, and I'm so sorry. How can we connect in this time? What do you need in terms of support? What do I need in terms of support? So rather than it becoming this divisive nature of like, well, you snapped at me, or you're not interested when I touch your arm anymore, and why is that? We don't have to personalize and attack or be reactive to these symptoms when we know what they are and why they're there.
I think that's something that really gets missed a lot in these kinds of conversations, that we're running this through a filter. Sometimes it looks like, well, he did this or she did this, or he's not doing this or she's not doing that. but it's being fueled by and fed by this chemical change that is happening in the body at the same time. And I think that is really important for people to know.
Yeah. And I think the lack of education and awareness is what leads to those midlife crises that often involve infidelity, right? Because it's like, well, I'm changing. And if I'm not ready or I'm not knowledgeable that this is a natural part of me aging, right? Then I'm going to look around and ask, what is triggering this change? What is causing my unhappiness? What is causing my libido to be less active than I'm used to it being? Again, because our constant variable is our partner, there's going to be a natural displacement onto there. And we can make some really impulsive, really poor choices in that fear response before we realize what's happening. And so I think we need so much more education and normalization of that change process, just like our, biological change process for men and women in different ways.
I totally agree with you. So how can people go about getting some of that education? Because I think it's critically important and honestly hard to find.
It is hard to find, unfortunately. Yeah. There's a lot of podcasts that are popping up now with specialists who are like, man, this is important information and it's not accessible. So I would just do a little bit of research on your own and find those providers that you trust who are aware of hormones and aging and very sex positive. We don't want to reinforce any kind of shame cycles or detrimental belief systems. But yeah, I mean, they're starting to pop up much more, which is great. It's needed.
Absolutely. Just like information around perimenopause and menopause, just looking back over the last 5 years, like I feel like there's so much more because there's a huge portion of the population stepping into this and going, what the fuck is going on? And how do I support my body? Like, this is awful. I remember when my mom went through this process and she's comfortable with me sharing this. One of the things that she said to me in a very tear-filled phone conversation was, if you don't do anything else, Adrienne, please let people know like what they can expect through menopause. And, she says, I feel like I've been going through it forever. It's been wrecking my life forever. And I've looked for information. My mom was a librarian for 18 years. So, pretty savvy with research. And she was like, I can't find like hardly anything. But that was many years ago now. So it's part of the reason why this show exists. She is an inspiration behind why this show exists, because I want women to know, one, you're beautiful the way you are and everything is totally normal. We just are in a different phase where you're navigating the world in a different rhythm than you did before, and that's okay. And that they know where to go for resources around topics like this. So if people are looking to connect with you, how can they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me through my website. All of my scheduling, my couples intimacy retreats, my 90-day program on relationship energetics, everything's accessible there, which is bathurstfamilytherapy.com. They can also find me on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, which is, my handle is phd.relationship.expert. Or just send me an email, which is help@bathurstfamilytherapy.com. And I'm happy to answer questions from today or talk about services, stuff like that. These are really important conversations. And I'm so grateful that you have created and continue to hold space for them to give the education that is so needed in our society. So thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your expertise. It has been such a pleasure. And until next time, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist, Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.